Now that you have your center panel fully finished with your buttons in place, it's time to attach the side panels and create those vertical pleats. The first thing you'll do is align your center panel with one of your side panels, right sides together. You want to make sure that this center seam is perfectly aligned, and you'll either pin or clip down this edge. I'm going to clip, and we will take it to the sewing machine and sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance along that edge. So there it is. Let's take it to the sewing machine. Make sure you always lock stitch or back stitch at the beginning just to reinforce those stitches. Your first side panel is now attached. We are going to serge these seams, but I like to do it at the end after both of them are attached so we can just move from one machine to the other. So let's go ahead and attach the second side to it. We're pretty much doing the same exact thing. Let's flip this around. Pinning this edge. You now have both of your side panels attached to your center panel. The dress is starting to look like it should, so we are going to take it to the serger and finish these edges. If you don't have a serger, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and zigzag across the edge here just to finish, just to give it a nice finish so it doesn't come unraveled in the wash. When you're on the serger, you want to make sure you can trim off the edge a little bit, but don't get too close to the stitching. And you want to make sure that you keep the rest of your dress away from the blade so that you don't end up cutting or serging any unwanted pieces. We have it. So both side panels are stitched and serged. So you want to press those seams towards the center panel, but we're not going to top stitch it at all. So you can go ahead and trim some of these serger tails, and I'll get my iron in place. It's going to want to go towards the outside, but you want to press these towards the center. So just give it a little tug like this, just to make sure all of your seams are nicely pulled out, and you just press it down the center like this. I'm going to press it from the front as well, but for now, let's just press the back. I keep it right here on those pin tucks for a couple of seconds extra, just to make sure, because the fabric is extra thick right here, so all the folds of fabric, so it doesn't want to fold as well. And then we'll press the other side. Again, keep the iron on those pin tucked areas a few seconds extra, just to get it nicely folded in there. And press all the way down. You can hit it with a little bit of steam just to make sure it's nicely pressed. And I'll press a little bit from the front as well. I have another serger tail in here. Making sure your seam is towards the center and not hitting those buttons, because you don't want those to melt. So just be careful when you get to over here, this area. You just want to get a nice crisp seam right there. Yeah, it's looking beautiful. That's exactly what it needs to look like. There we go. I'm gonna put the iron over here for now. So the next thing we need to do is create those beautiful vertical pleats. And I wanted to pause right here for a second just to talk about the difference between pleats and pin tucks. Because sometimes those terms get interchanged, and some people think that they're the same thing. They are similar, but they're definitely not the same thing. So let me tell you about the difference between a pin tuck or a tuck and a pleat. It's not the width of the fold of fabric, because some people think it's that tucks are narrow and pleats are wide. That's not the difference, because you can actually have a pin tuck be pretty much any width. You can have a really super narrow pin tuck, like a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch, but ours are a 1/4 inch. You can even have some that are a 1/2 an inch, and you can have pleats that are really super narrow and really wide. So essentially, you could have a pin tuck and a pleat that are exactly the same width of fabric. So it's not, the width of fabric does not determine whether it's a pin tuck or a pleat. What determines the difference is pin tucks are always sewn all the way through from one end of the pin tuck to the other. So like we did at the beginning when we created this panel, we secured that pin tuck to the fabric, that fold to the fabric from end to end. Now some pin tucks are vertical, like think a tuxedo shirt. They have a series of pin tucks at the top, and you'll see the stitching go all the way from end to end. So it doesn't have to be horizontal and it doesn't have to be vertical. It could be either way. But what makes a pin tuck is that you have that row of stitching securing that tuck from end to end, whether it's vertical or horizontal. A pleat, on the other hand, is only secured either at one end, like we're going to be doing here, and left open to flare out at the other end. Sometimes pleats are secured at the top and the bottom, and it just kind of bubbles out at the end to create a different effect. So pleats are usually more functional than pin tucks. Pin tucks will be more of a decorative thing, but pleats are normally there to add fullness to a garment. So for example, if you think of a pleated skirt, it has that accordion effect at the end. So all the pleats are secured at the top and they're just left to flare out at the bottom, and it creates that beautiful accordion effect at the bottom. Box pleats and other kinds of pleats that meet in the middle also flare out at the bottom. What we're going to create here is a vertical box pleat. It's not an accordion pleat, and it's going to flare out at the bottom to create more of an A-line effect. So eventually it's going to end up looking sort of like this. We're going to create a nice crisp crease right here, but this is not going to be sewn in place. It's going to be left to flare out like that so that our dress will have that beautiful A-line effect. So let's go ahead and do that now. The way you create your pleat, remember when we added that little notch right here at the corner? That notch is going to be aligned with our center seam. Not the center notch, but just that seam. So we're going to fold this right sides together until that notch is aligned with the seam from the center panel. So it's right about there. We're going to make sure to press it perfectly straight like this. Yes, just like that. Make sure your bottom edge is perfectly aligned with pretty much itself like this. I'll get my iron and I'll press it in place. The other side will be done exactly the same. I'm gonna go ahead and press the other side just so we'll use the iron all at once. So there's your one side, and then we'll press this side in place. Again, I'm aligning that little notch with the seam just like so. You'll have about a ½ inch of space. It's a little bit lesser on the smaller sizes than on the bigger sizes, but that part doesn't really matter. As long as you align your your notch right here with that center seam, and you can see it right here that it's nice and straight, and that bottom edge is nice and aligned too. Then you'll know that you can go ahead and press. Don't be afraid to press at this point, that you're pressing at the wrong spot or whatever, because once you open it up, you'll be able to see if it's in the right spot. And if it's not, just open it back up, reposition it, and go ahead and press again. You haven't stitched anything down, so no harm done. Okay, I have both of my creases. So in order to create my pleat, I'm going to be stitching it down only, let me turn this around just so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to be stitching the side down from the top, so pretty much from this corner where our little notch is, all the way to the end of just the pin tucked panel. So this is how we're securing the pleats to the dress. The rest of it will be left just pressed but not sewn, so that it will flare out and it will create that beautiful A-line effect. So I'm gonna go ahead and stitch this one down first, from end to end, and make sure you back stitch too, because that one is an easy one to come unstitched. I will make sure that my needle, I'm going to lower my needle by hand just to make sure it is entering exactly over my previous vertical stitch right here, and I'm going to pretty much be stitching right over that previous stitch line. I'm going to back stitch and then stitch all the way up. And I will back stitch at the end. Great. This is your first pleat. Check it out. So it's nice, it's secured here at the top, but it flares out at the bottom. I'm gonna do the second one real quick. So our pin tucks are created, and what I like to do at this point is just to give it one last press. And I like to press this crease onto the pin tuck, right where it wants to fold. You really don't have to force it or anything. Your fabric is going to want to just naturally fold right there and right there. So I'm going to press it all the way down so you have a nice crisp pleat on either side. Just like this. Oh, it looks so beautiful. There it is. So your front panel of your dress is now complete, and all of these folds in the back are going to get hidden within the lining, so you will never see this. So you don't have to worry about tacking anything down or anything, because these will never be seen. With this dress is fully lined, so all of this will be covered by that lining fabric. And now we are ready to start working on the back panel.